Record. Chapter 10 again looks at the physiology of the special and general senses. So it's pretty big. There's quite a bit of information in there, and I tried to glean out and get a lot of the most important aspects of it here. There are characteristics that basically all sensory receptors will pretty much share, and that's what the first part is here. The second part of this things are going to be involving all the special senses, and that's where the vast majority of our lecture will be spent. So let's look at just kind of a basic introduction here. The great thing about all sensory receptors is that they will what is called transduce. They change, okay? They change one type of input into an electrical form, okay? So they're going to change whatever it is that they interpret. They're going to, they're going to transduce, change mechanical touch into a nerve impulse, to which our brain will interpret as soft touch, light touch, deep touch, vibration, a whole number of various different mechanical type of inputs. There's a concept, and this, I can't remember if this book really gets into it a whole heck of a lot. BLED. It's called a labeled line. And this refers to a specific stimulus. Let's see. A specific stimulus will travel in a specific pathway. So, and again, it's called a labeled line theory. Everything's specific, okay? I have receptors in the skin that, will detect mechano, so touch, pressure, vibration. I can't put it up and interpret light. The sensory receptors in my ear are there to interpret sound. The sensory receptors in a different part of the inner ear are involved with determining balance and equilibrium. Right? They are hardwired to only interpret that. Right? And that's referred to as a labeled line theory. Optic nerve only interprets visual stimuli, visual input. All right. So we have a vast number of these various different sensory receptors. And even when we get to some of the special senses, there are hundreds of these receptors. Okay? There's a receptor in the nose for every different smell that's out there in the world. It's crazy. Right? So these are all hardwired and very specific. When we look at taste receptors, it's pretty interesting. We have 5 different, senses of taste, and all of them are involved with a specific type of stimuli that they get triggered. Send an impulse, and we interpret that as sweet, sour, bitter, whatever the case may be. So everything is going to be very specific. And again, sensory receptors change. They transduce. That's the fancy word. Okay. Take that energy from the real world, light rays, X-ray, or not, a visual spectrum, and change it into a nerve impulse. We have a multitude of various different categories, and I think there's maybe a table on the next slide that has these as well. But, functional categories are kind of all over the place. Some of your special senses are chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors just detect chemicals within the environment. This could be in the blood. We have a number of chemoreceptors that we'll talk about when we start talking about hydrogen ion levels and sodium levels with blood pressure and a whole host of other different chemicals, neurotransmitters, hormones, all these fun different things. So there are a vast number of chemoreceptors. They can be general, they can be special, like taste and smell. Photoreceptors, again, sense light, special sense. Thermoreceptors, we have ones that respond to cold. We have those that respond to heat. Those that can respond to extreme heat. stimulate pain receptors as well, which are nociceptors down there. Methanol and capsaicin function a little bit similarly in regards to thermoreceptors, where methanol can trigger cold receptors because it stimulates the same thing. Capsaicin can stimulate heat receptors, so you get that heat sensation if you eat a lot of spicy food. And then mechanoreceptors are really all over the place, right? Again, touch, general type of sense, vibration, pressure changes, continuous touch. There's a lot of semantics when it comes to mechanoreceptors. And then hearing is a mechanoreceptor as well, okay? When you hear different sounds, they push those stereocilia, and that's what triggers you to, okay, I hear that, it's coming from that location over there. Right? And here just kind of give some examples and whatnot of various different mechanoreceptors, sensory type receptors here. Should be a nice little quick dirty review of anatomy. Obviously, we can base it upon the type of information that's being delivered to the brain. Is it more body position? Is it more touch? Is it special sense? Well, that's what our three categories here are for the type of sensory information coming in. Proprioceptors are found in muscle bellies. And we'll hint at some of those when we get into the next unit. You find them in tendons. Tendons are around a joint. So you find a number of these there. We have proprioceptive input coming in from the middle ear, or inner ear, sorry. We have a number of proprioceptors in the neck. Understanding where all of these are, when you're doing an assessment on a patient, you could figure out, is it an inner ear issue? Is it a proprioceptive issue involving not the inner ear? Maybe the neck. Is it a proprioceptive input regarding body position, joints? So you can do various different testing to figure out where the screw up is in the body. Skin receptors, cutaneous receptors, again, all kinds of general types of sensation there. And then obviously all of our special senses, and all of our special senses are in our head. Okay? Vision, hearing, taste, smell, equilibrium, all that fun stuff. Okay? And we'll look how all this happens up in that little head of ours. The most kind of big classification for which we can clump sensory information in is just by where in the world it's coming from. Is it responding to stuff outside of the body, or is it responding to stuff inside the body? I mean, that's as basic as it gets. So we'll talk about a lot of these receptors today, and then we'll continue to talk about them as we go through the various different muscular system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, okay, right? So we'll introduce them today and continue to add more and more layers to them as we kind of go on. By more and more layers, I mean, connect all the little respiratory centers, all the reflex centers for all these various different things, for pH, for blood pressure, how we can increase our rate and depth of breathing to get more oxygen in or get more CO2 out. So all sorts of fun things we can do from here on out after we get this nervous system under our belts.